Hey everyone, welcome back to Enneagram Conversations. We're going to have a lot of fun with this new series, especially with this new format, which I'm really excited to share with you guys. But let's get started in talking about what SoulCare is. And so SoulCare is kind of defined by the late Dr. Larry Crabb as the ability to become the healthiest version of yourself so that you are the greatest gift to others. As Dr. Crabb would say, that we are walking civil wars when we are forever torn between the flesh and the spirit. And then the flesh is getting things right so that life works, versus the spirit, which is becoming more aware of and more attuned to the spirit in our lives and following its lead rather than the flesh. And so how this comes into the idea of the Enneagram, your dominant type is most often your definition for what it looks like to get things right so that life works. And so what we're going to look at is how do we take our base, our dominant type, and grow in such a way that Jesus is bringing something beautiful out of us while still being true to ourselves and how he originally designed us. And so today we're going to look at some concepts. I have a formula for you, and we're going to talk about neuroscience for a little bit just to kind of help us understand where we are and what we're talking about. And in the next videos, we're going to start going through the Enneagram types and showing what sustainable growth looks like for those types and kind of some things to watch for and things to focus on specific to the types. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's go ahead and bring out the formula. Okay, so in my opinion, this formula represents the key factors needed for sustainable growth. Okay, sustainable growth is all about soul care, becoming more like Christ. Okay, so this is the formula. SG equals DVCR times T. Okay, so the first thing, T stands for time. SG, it's sustainable growth. And the rest of these, let's break these down. So we have D, which is for discomfort. Discomfort could be the inciting incident that makes you decide that you need to change, or it could be the discomfort that you feel because you're trying to change your patterns and habits to become more like Christ, okay? If you did not have discomfort, you would have no need to change because the presence of discomfort means that you need to resolve some sort of tension. So that's why you have to have it. The second one, I'm going to pull up my notes so we make sure that we are not misspelling things, how embarrassing that would be. But the next one is V. Tim, I need a new computer. I threatened it, it goes. Okay, so back to the V, it stands for vulnerability. So in the way that it's described in Latin, vulnerability is the ability to be wounded. And so obviously what we're talking about is for you to have sustainable growth, you need to open yourself up to be wounded. We're going to finish writing that before I keep talking. Vulnerability, you need to have vulnerability. If you try to change, but you never make yourself able to be wounded, how is that even going to happen? So vulnerability means you're opening yourself up to the possibility of a new idea or a new picture or a new vision of what God has for you and where he's leading you on your journey. Okay, so discomfort and vulnerability. You have to have these two things, but at the same time, these are not happy feelings. This makes you feel vulnerable. This makes you feel uncomfortable. So what do? Well, we'll bring in our next factor, which is community. Community is what makes discomfort and vulnerability tolerable. Community is what is going to support you on either side to help you on your path. And community, it could be your friend group, your small group, your dig group, your pastor, your counselor, your therapist, your trusted friends, your parents, anything like that. If you say this is a safe person, they are part of your community and they're going to help you on that process. And once again, it makes discomfort and vulnerability tolerable because you're not doing this alone. And then finally, R is recovery. And I cannot say this enough. The idea that you can just set a goal and then go and never look back is ridiculous. Okay, so think about how Olympians train, how gymnastics train. They stretch small bits, they increase the amount of weight, they increase the amount of flexibility, they increase the amount of stretch at small increments at a time, because if you do too much too fast, you snap and damage something, or even worse, you slingshot back and you're back further than when you began to begin with. Recovery is essential because you are changing the patterns and habits of your brain. Your brain does not like that. Your brain likes to conserve energy. And when you start changing things up, you're burning more energy and your brain says, ooh, we need to stop this. It's going to cause discomfort. But you're saying, no, we're still following forward because this is where God is leading me. Okay, so this is the formula here that we need. Okay, now let's talk about how do we measure. This is something that's very difficult to measure. Each person has their own way of measuring. Each person has their own goals, their own pace, all that kind of stuff. But we do have two big ways that we are going to measure how well you're doing and how far you have come or how far you're going. Okay, so first one, the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. If these 9 qualities are showing up in your life, if it's showing up in your ministry, if it's showing up in your parenting, there's a good chance that you are going in the direction you need to go. So that's the first and biggest one. We are paying attention to what fruit are you bearing, okay? And the second one is we're going to look over here at this box here. There's something called the window of tolerance. This was coined by Dr. Dan Siegel, an interpersonal neurobiologist who's got some great stuff that just really works with Christian spiritual formation and discipline and all these kinds of things. And so it's gaining popularity quickly, so you may have heard it. We're just going to abbreviate it as WAT. All right, but this stands for the window of tolerance. Okay, and the way that it works is when you are between these two bars, when you're right here in this open space, you have full access to your brain. You have full access to the way God designed your brain to function. But when you move out of this area into the hyper arousal or the hypo arousal, your brain shuts off important systems to conserve energy. Think about a Navy warship out on the water. As soon as an enemy is spotted, they'll send out the call, battle stations, battle stations. And that means that everyone has a job to do and all the extra stuff gets shut down and put away because you need to focus on a threat. If you are up in the hyper area of your window of tolerance, you are responding to a perceived threat. And the hyper, think fight or flight. You're either preparing yourself to punch someone or run from something. Okay, so this one is associated with anger. This one is associated with high heart rate. This is associated with heavy, fast, labored breathing, all that. And then down here for the hypo, this is the shutdown one. This is the one that makes you want to feel like you want to be as small as possible so that the perceived threat either doesn't see you or passes over without bothering you. Okay, but also the hypoarousal is also where you want to seek comfort as quickly as possible. You're in an extreme amount of discomfort and your body's saying you need to comfort yourself because you're in danger. All right, so this is it. So every day, every person through all walks of life, every hour of the day, they are traveling along this path somewhere between hyper and hypoarousal. Okay, so what we need to know though is that this can grow and it can shrink. So thanks to neuroplasticity, we are never static. We always have a chance to change and grow, but it can grow or shrink. Okay, so some of the things that shrink your window of tolerance, that make it smaller: prolonged stress, a traumatic event, or a failure to process a traumatic event in a healthy way. These things are going to shrink your window of tolerance, which means it's easier for you to bounce out of your window into the parts where you are responding to threats and perceived dangers rather than building relationships in community. But some of the things that can increase your window of tolerance, I have down right here. If you want to take notes, you can. This is called the Big Six. It's breathing, okay? Okay, rest, movement and exercise, sleep, which is different than rest, nourishment, proper food nourishment, and being hydrated. These things help you maintain your window and increase it. But also for us who believe in Jesus, we have prayer and singing worship. These are also things that have been studied and shown to bring a person back into their window quickly. So it's not about trying to avoid getting out of there. Really, the question is, how quickly can you recover your window when you realized you're out of it? Okay, this is a very important reason why we need to pay attention to this, because, as I said before, you are losing vital parts of your brain when you are out of your window. Okay, so that means that you're losing the ability to have sustainable growth. And if you lose the ability to have sustainable growth, you cannot care for your soul in a way, so you are not the healthiest version of yourself, and you are not the greatest gift to others. So let's go back to the brain to try to trace out. I want to show you guys how it works. So your brain receives signals from your 5 senses and all that good stuff, and it all travels here to the brainstem, and the path of the brain is from the bottom to the top and the right to the left, and that's how it always is, and that will never change. But it's being fed through the brainstem and into the middle of the brain right there, and this is called your limbic system. Your limbic system is a combination of about 4 different parts of the brain that form your limbic system right here, and then after it goes through there, it's then passed along to the prefrontal cortex, which is right there in the front, okay? When people say your brains are not yet done developing, they're talking about the prefrontal cortex, okay? So teenagers, children, young adults, and in fact, they're even talking like 30 years old now, and your brain is still growing and developing, whatever. The point is, this is the sweet spot. Community, relationships, attachment, logical, thoughtful discussion, and even being able to change your mind, all that is central in the prefrontal cortex. But what happens is when there's a perceived threat, that part of your brain gets shut off, because you don't have time for logical discussions when danger is on the horizon. This is where your limbic system kicks in. Your limbic system takes over, shuts off the prefrontal cortex, and when that happens, you lose the ability to be discomfort, because your brain is oriented towards protection and survival. It's trying to find comfort as fast. It cannot get to the ice cream quick enough. Okay? You're losing vulnerability. Why on earth would you go into battle while being vulnerable? Be a better way to say it. Okay, you lose community, because right now you're trying to assess who's on my side and who is not. And because the idea is you're trying to recover, but you're also very stretched and very strange. This whole formula goes out the window when you're out of your window of tolerance, because your limbic system has taken over. When it comes to the people who we meet and minister to as practitioners or as professional vocational pastors and counselors and all that, the people that we meet, their addictions, they come from the limbic system. Okay, their emotional reactions, they come from the limbic system. Their inability to choose a different path comes from them living and dwelling in the limbic system. So here, this causes me a great deal of empathy for people in the world, but also at the same time, this gives me hope, because God designed a way for us to work with what we have to better reflect who He is. So there we go. So we're going to stop right now, but we're going to take this formula here and we're going to use the window of tolerance in our further videos when we look at the Enneagram types, and we're going to break down what it looks like for sustainable growth for each type and obstacles that they need to overcome. All right, guys, if you have any questions and comments, whatever, feel free to write them in the Slack. I'm always open and available. So I had a lot of fun, guys. Thanks for tuning in.